Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the heart of the Appalachian foothills, where dawn clings softly to the trees and river mist drapes the earth like a shawl. You're waking in a Cherokee village, not marked on any tourist map, just a quiet circle of wooden lodges, surrounded by pine, hickory, and sweet gum trees that murmur in the breeze. Somewhere in the near distance, a redbird sings lazily, and a thin trail of smoke rises from a low chimney, curling upward like a prayer. Your bed is a woven mat of river cane and buffalo hide, and your hands are still stained slightly with the walnut dye from yesterday. There's no alarm clock here, no phone buzzes or car horns or emails, just the gentle crackle of firewood and the swish of someone sweeping the packed dirt floor outside your door. You blink slowly, wondering if your dreams were about weaving or walking, or maybe just sitting very quietly for an unusually long time. You might be thinking, shouldn't I be doing something productive right now? But let's be honest, you're listening to a podcast about 18th century basketry to fall asleep. You've already won the Anti-Hustle Award tonight. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening somewhere far from the Appalachians, whether it's 2 a.m. in Tokyo or 6 p.m. in Saskatchewan, drop your local time and place in the comments. I always love seeing where this little storytelling stream flows. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You nudge the doorway flap aside and step into the early light. Mist creeps along the ground, weaving between tall grass, stones, and clay jars half buried in the earth. Chickens scratch lazily in the distance, not quite ready to commit to the day, while a small group of women sit cross-legged near the fire pit, already unwinding river cane. You can smell the sweet musk of pine resin and the faint tang of hickory ash carried on the breeze. A dog, short-haired and amber-eyed, rises to greet you, tail thumping once before curling back into sleep. A woman nods toward a spare seat, and gestures come. No one here is in a rush. Weaving, like storytelling, requires patience and a preference for rhythm over speed. You settle onto the packed ground beside the women. One of them hands you a warm clay cup filled with hominy tea. Another, older than the others, starts humming an old tune, a melody with no sharp edges, just a soft undulation like river water. Her hands move almost unconsciously as she begins a basket coil, the split cane bending obediently in her fingers. This is not just morning routine, it's living memory. Archaeologists have uncovered basket fragments from the southeastern U.S. that date back nearly 8,000 years. Cherokee weavers, over centuries, have refined this art into a distinct blend of utility and sacred tradition. Woven baskets once stored everything from seeds and salt to herbal medicines and ceremonial tools. And these aren't just containers, they're stories told in fiber. Each pattern reflects not only the weaver's lineage, but also her land, her river, her season. Some even believe the patterns whisper back when handled correctly, like a subtle language pressed into reed and bark. Historians still argue whether Cherokee basketry developed independently or evolved through contact with other tribes like the Creek and Choctaw. But while scholars debate, the women here simply keep weaving. Across the clearing, a child plays with a small, lopsided basket, dragging it along the dirt by its handle. No one stops her. It's the first step toward fluency in the language of pattern. You're offered a bundle of raw river cane, recently harvested and still green. The elder taps the pile gently and begins to explain, through slow gestures, more than words, how you'll learn to split and shave the cane, soak it, strip it, and turn it into something that will last longer than most of your online passwords. There's something oddly satisfying about how quiet the village feels despite the activity. You begin to notice the tiniest sounds, the creak of wood under a seated body, the soft scrape of stone against fiber, the exhale of breath as someone stands. Basketry here isn't a pastime or a business, it's a rhythm, a tempo that continues even when storms come, when settlers arrive, when elders pass. The thread never quite breaks. You glance down at the elder's hands. Her fingers are gnarled, calloused, sun-creased, and stained with old dye, yet they move like they remember something you don't, something you can almost catch if you're still enough. There's no need to ask questions yet. Today will be long, gentle, and full of quiet lessons, and your place in this circle is earned not by what you know, but by how still you're willing to become. The sun rises slowly above the trees, casting long shadows on the fire circle. The weaving begins. You follow a narrow footpath worn smooth by generations of bare feet, your steps muffled by pine needles and the soft crumble of dry leaves. The women ahead of you walk with quiet confidence, baskets slung over their arms, each containing a small knife, a bone awl, and a coil of twine. They speak in low tones, switching easily between English and Cherokee, their voices rising and falling like a breeze teasing the treetops. The trail winds down toward a lazy bend in the river where white oak trees grow tall and river cane flourishes in clustered thickets. The air feels damper here, scented with moss, earth, and the faint bitterness of sap. You pause to notice the river's rhythm, slow and deliberate, just like the weavers themselves. Dragonflies dart across the surface. Somewhere nearby, a frog croaks in solitary protest. The elder beside you, the same woman from the fire circle, leans down and snaps a stalk of river cane with a sound like a muffled crackle. She holds it up to the light, turning it this way and that, before nodding in approval. You try your own hand at harvesting one, pulling the blade she lent you from its leather sheath. It takes more effort than you expected. The stalk resists, its fibers strong, but eventually yields with a reluctant sigh. She grins faintly at your effort and slips it into your basket. You work side by side with the others, collecting cane carefully, avoiding the younger shoots and those too brittle from the cold. Some of the weavers fan out farther down the riverbank, where clumps of white oak grow. Here, they begin selecting saplings, choosing the straightest ones. One woman kneels to peel back the bark, revealing the pale, pliable wood beneath. She splits the sapling lengthwise with the kind of precision you'd expect from a surgeon, not a grandmother in a linen wrap. White oak's heartwood holds stories. One weaver murmurs to you, if it splits easy, it wants to become something. That's the kind of logic that makes perfect sense out here. River cane has been used by the Cherokee for millennia, not just in baskets, but in housing, arrows, flutes, even blowguns. It's one of the Southeast's most ecologically vital plants. And yet, river cane stands today are endangered, diminished by agriculture and urban sprawl. Several elders here work with botanists to restore its presence along creek beds and floodplains. You're told that some weavers will drive hours just to find a healthy patch to harvest. Historians still argue whether the earliest Cherokee cane baskets were purely utilitarian or also ritualistic in nature. Some believe ceremonial baskets came later, while others suggest even the most rugged gathering basket held sacred meaning in its form. One thing is certain: each material you harvest today is handled with care, as though touching it wrong might bruise some quiet spirit living inside. After a while, your basket is nearly full. The stalks crisscross over one another in an organized chaos. You sit down on a mossy rock, rubbing your palms and realizing how even this simple task leaves a satisfying ache. The others gather around, resting for a moment. Someone passes a gourd filled with spring water, cool and mineral rich. You sip and hand it along, nodding thanks. Then slowly, the peeling begins, using a split bone knife. The elder slices a stalk along its length and bends it open. You can see the interior glisten faintly, almost like damp bamboo. The weavers demonstrate how to remove the inner pith, leaving behind long strips of outer cane that will be soaked, softened, and eventually dyed. It's a process both meditative and precise. You try your hand at splitting, your fingers clumsy at first. The strip tears sideways. A soft sigh escapes your lips, but no one scolds you. The elder simply places another stalk in your hand and nods for you to try again. Here, failure isn't failure. It's just a thread that hasn't found its pattern yet. In one corner, a teenage girl and her aunt laugh over a knot in a cane strip that refuses to lie flat. The girl mutters something in Cherokee, and the aunt replies with a story, something about a turtle who braided grass so poorly it turned into a snake. You're not sure if it's an actual myth or just a joke, but either way, the girl rolls her eyes and tries again. By late morning, the sunlight slants through the canopy in golden ribbons. You've lost all sense of urgency. The basket on your arm feels heavier now, not just with cane and oak, but with a quiet kind of pride. You're learning, slowly, not just how to weave, but how to wait. You turn to see the elder bundling her finished strips, tying them with a cord dyed from pokeweed berries. Ready to soften, she says, tapping the bundle. So are you. Your fingers are stiff, your knees dusty, but your thoughts, surprisingly clear, back up the trail. The women begin walking again, shadows stretching ahead of them. You follow quietly, cane over your shoulder, a soft breeze brushing your cheek like the whisper of woven wisdom. Back at the village, a pot of water simmers above a low flame near the fire circle. The elder motions for you to sit beside her. Gesturing toward a bundle of river cane strips she lays on a wooden board. Steam curls from the pot as she dips the strips in one by one, letting them soak briefly before pulling them out with a forked stick. You can see how the heat softens the cane just enough to make it pliable, but not too much, or it'll lose its strength. Your fingers itch to try it. She hands you a fresh strip and nods toward the board. You place the wet cane down gently, as if it might break from the wrong kind of pressure. She gives you a small, smooth stone and shows you how to press it lengthwise along the strip. The pressure flattens the fibers evenly. You can feel the give under your fingers, like working soft clay, but with a faint crunch that says the cane remembers being wild. Preparing the strips is not a mechanical step. It's ritual. Each motion has been passed down, not with instructions, but by sitting beside someone and learning through rhythm. through repetition, through quiet watching. The woman beside you points to the strip in your hand and makes a slow gesture, drawing a curve in the air with her finger. Not too straight, she says softly. Basket doesn't want to be perfect. It wants to remember the tree. The phrase floats in your mind like mist. You press another strip, then another. White oak is next. Another weaver. This one, younger and sharp-eyed, demonstrates how to separate the growth rings of a sapling into delicate layers. She bends one until it nearly snaps, then pulls it slowly, evenly, into a long ribbon. Each one is like a thread of muscle, narrow and sinewy. She wraps it around a wooden dowel to curl, then sets it beside your pile. As you work, you hear snippets of conversation around you. Two elders argue gently about whether a certain split technique came from the snowbird community or from basket makers farther west. One insists the coil she uses came from her grandmother who wove through the 1920s, while the other claims it's older, maybe brought over during the first migration from the mountains. Historians still debate how much the Cherokee basket traditions evolved independently versus being shaped by trade and contact with other nations. Some argue that earlier methods were more utilitarian, while others insist the patterns themselves reflect an embedded cosmology, maps of stars, rivers, or spirit beings. No one agrees completely. The women here, however, seem unbothered by the scholarly murkiness. They have their lineage, their muscle memory, their stories woven into the materials. You realize the tools used are just as important as the materials. Most are handmade, bone blades, carved awls, smooth stones. One woman shows you a scraper passed down from her great-grandfather. The handle is polished by use, and it bears an odd little notch on the side. He said it was to line up with the edge of the moon. She laughs. You're not sure if she's joking. Maybe she's not. Another tool catches your eye, a long, flat reed, smoothed on one end, wrapped with dyed thread at the other. It's used for pressing down rows of weaving once they're started. Its decorative thread glows faintly in the light, not flashy, just precise. The air smells of steam, bark, and damp fiber. Your hands are slick from the moisture. You pause to shake them out, flexing your fingers. The elder beside you smiles and hands you a cloth, then gestures toward a dry basket under the bench. First rows now, she says. Your hands are listening. You lift the basket shell, just a starter ring, really, but enough to begin coiling. She demonstrates the base coil slowly, letting the first strand loop through a center knot, then double back, then press tight. It's a movement that defies pure logic until you try it yourself. You fumble the first loop. The second is too loose. The third catches. The fourth fits. That small success settles into you like a warm stone. You keep going, slowly, imperfectly, but going. You glance up and notice the others is still working, unfazed by your pace. There's no rush, no quota, no looming deadline, just the quiet idea that each strand you lay is a piece of time itself, curved and held in place. A younger child waddles up and plops beside you, watching silently. Her fingers twitch as if mimicking your own. You offer her a half-done strip. She shakes her head. Too soon, she whispers, and you smile. She already knows there's an order to things. The afternoon light begins to soften, and shadows stretch long across the dusty ground. Your hands are sore, your eyes a little tired, but you've got the beginnings of a basket in your lap, a crooked, slightly lumpy circle of promise. It's enough for today. The sun has begun its slow arc westward when you're invited to move over to the dye area, a shaded corner beneath a lean-to built from stripped saplings and bark. Hanging from pegs and branches are bundles of dried roots, bark, berries, and leaves. The air is dense with the earthy scents of things steeped and stained: walnut husk, bloodroot, sumac, elderberry. Steam rises in gentle tendrils from several large clay pots, each bubbling with a different potion of color. A woman waves you over, her apron stained with hues of ochre, rust, and plum. She has an armful of soaked cane strips and a knowing half smile. "Let's make the forest speak," she says, and you believe her. You're handed a long wooden ladle and asked to stir a pot of walnut hull dye. The water has darkened into a velvety brown black, smelling like damp wood and ink. The woman explains how black walnut gives a deep, almost permanent stain, a color used for contrast or shadowing in complex patterns. She stirs in a handful of wood ash, which apparently helps the dye set. Chemistry, it turns out, has been sleeping in these pots long before anyone had lab goggles. She leans in closer. "Don't let it boil," she murmurs, eyes narrowing. Boiling wakes up the ghosts. You glance at her quickly. She's already walking away. You're unsure whether to lower the flame or apologize to the ghost directly. Next to the walnut pot is another, red as a desert sunset. Bloodroot. The dye is more temperamental, she warns. Too much heat and it dulls. Not enough, and it refuses to bind. Cherokee weavers once used bloodroots for ceremonial pieces, or to mark coming-of-age patterns. A few families still grow patches near their homes, tending them like heirlooms. Historians still argue whether early Cherokee dyes were mostly derived from native plants or borrowed from neighboring tribes. The oral traditions blur timelines, and written records from early settlers are unreliable at best. Some even claimed, wrongly, that Cherokee dyes were imported from European traders. The women here snort at that idea. "You think we waited for someone else to teach us how to boil a plant," one says, shaking her head. Nearby, two teenage boys are stripping bark from a piece of butternut tree, laughing as they dare each other to touch the dye pot barehanded. "You'll look like a raccoon." One taunts, the other shrugs and plunges his hand in anyway. When he pulls it out, his palm is stained a dusky grayish purple. He grins and waves dramatically, fingers splayed like a peacock. You're shown how to bundle your prepared cane strips and place them in a shallow dish of dye. You rotate them gently, making sure each part soaks evenly. The elder overseeing you nods in approval. "Even the fibers want to be seen," she murmurs. No hiding. She adds a pinch of copper shavings to the dye, an old trick to make the hue shimmer slightly in sunlight. As you work, you notice a pile of old, faded baskets stacked beneath the lean-to. Each is labeled in Cherokee syllabary, marked by age and origin. These are practice baskets, left behind by previous students, some going back decades. One of them is warped and faded, but the coil structure is complex and oddly beautiful, like someone wove a daydream into it. "Mine," the elder says, catching your glance. "I was 12. She doesn't say more. She doesn't need to. You begin to understand that dyeing here isn't just about color. It's a step of intention, a way of declaring that this basket, this material, belongs to someone, that it carries a specific memory, a season, a hand, a fire. Your fingers are stained by now, dark at the tips, almost like ink smudged writing. You rub them together and watch the color cling. It's oddly satisfying, a kind of soft permanence, the kind that doesn't shout, but endures. A woman nearby lifts her dyed strips into the sunlight. They glisten, red, black, golden. Sun seals the story, she explains, laying them on a raised wooden rack. You do the same, lining your strips beside hers, careful not to let them tangle. There's a moment of stillness as the afternoon wind passes through the lean-to. The dyed strips rustle faintly, like wind chimes made of color. Someone hums a tune in the background. You don't recognize the words, but the melody feels old and familiar, as if it's been passed down through dyed cane and whispered across baskets for generations. You glance down at your own rack. The colors aren't quite even. Some strips are darker, others too faint. You feel a flicker of self-consciousness, but the elder touches your arm and says, simply, "Good." Now they have voice, and you realize they do, later in the day, beneath a slowly shifting sky of silver clouds and golden shafts of sun. You return to the main weaving area. Your dyed cane strips are now dry, slightly curled, warm to the touch from their time in the sun. A few women sit cross-legged in a semicircle, their laps full of coiled beginnings. Some are weaving bases, others working the walls upward in graceful spirals. From a distance, the baskets resemble sea creatures, curled, open-mouthed, gently rising from the earth. You settle in beside them, your own bundle resting on your knees, and begin again with the coil you started earlier. The elder from this morning sits opposite you, already 4 rows deep into a new creation. She doesn't look up, but she speaks clearly enough to be heard across the circle. "First rows are for the ancestors," she says. "The ones after that for you." Her fingers move almost hypnotically, over, under, fold, some pull. You watch, then mimic. The dyed cane slides beneath your fingers, stiff but responsive. You anchor the new strip with a loop, press it tight, then weave it alongside the older row. The rhythm returns. It's easier now, still imperfect, still a bit awkward, but your hands begin to find the music hidden inside the repetition. Each movement builds upon the last. You begin to understand how even small mistakes are folded in, absorbed, hidden in the spiral. It's not about erasing errors, but weaving through them, correcting by continuation. There's a lesson in that, though no one states it aloud. One woman begins humming a low tune, 3 notes rising and falling like a creak over stone. Another joins in, then another. Before long, the air fills with a wordless melody, the kind that seeps into your bones without asking permission. You hum along quietly. You don't know the song, but somehow it knows you. You pause for a moment to inspect your work. The base is beginning to form a gentle curve, like the bottom of a shallow bowl. You test its shape so it holds. Your fingers press the sides upward, strip by strip, slowly coaxing it into something both practical and beautiful. Patterns begin to emerge, not just from color, but from tension, angle, repetition. The elder leans over to show you a specific design: 2 dark strips, 1 light, then a tight wrap, repeated across 3 coils. She doesn't explain its meaning aloud. She doesn't need to. Later, you'll learn it's a traditional water path motif, meant to signify rivers flowing together, a symbol of family lines, merging and diverging, winding onward through generations. Mainstream historians often cite Cherokee basketry as purely functional, tools of storage and trade, but they frequently overlook these layered visual metaphors. Scholars still debate whether early patterns were intended as narrative devices or evolved into storytelling tools later. Regardless, these women know each twist and spiral holds something deeper. You glance around the circle and notice how different each basket is. Some are squat and wide, made for storing cornmeal or beans. Others are narrow, tall, likely meant for herbs or feathers. One weaver shapes a tray-like basket, flat and circular, for sifting. She's using only natural cane, undyed, letting the pattern speak through light and shadow alone. You wonder how long it takes to master all of this. The elder laughs softly as if she's read your mind. You don't finish learning, she says. You just weave until you die. There's no drama in the statement, just fact. A kind of woven truth, a soft-spoken and sturdy. Later, a small girl walks up carrying a broken coil. Her lip is trembling. One of the women beside you pats the ground, and the girl sits, sulking, without a word. The woman begins pulling the coil apart, gently, until only loose strips remain. Then she hands them back to the girl. Start again, it will remember. You catch that phrase, it will remember. The girl nods and starts over, more slowly this time. The sun continues its slow descent. Your own basket has taken shape, a gentle, imperfect bowl that rocks slightly when placed on the ground. You feel the weight of it in your hands, not just the fiber, but the hours, the care, the patience. It isn't a masterpiece, not yet, but it exists, and that's enough. Across the circle, one of the women blows gently across her finished basket, scattering bits of dust and fiber. First breath, she says, and sets it down beside her. The others do the same, a quiet ritual, nearly invisible unless you're paying attention. You are? You wake from a short rest to the sound of soft rustling and the low hum of voices exchanging stories. Around the fire circle, the weavers have returned from their own quiet pauses, and now sit with renewed focus, laying out bundles of dyed cane in thoughtful rows. But something has shifted. This time, they aren't just weaving baskets, they're arranging patterns, deliberate and precise, like composers setting down a melody. A woman beckons you over and motions for you to sit beside her. Laid before her is a nearly completed basket, its walls high, its shape symmetrical, and its sides marked with repeating diamond forms in rust and black. She points to a single row near the center, where the pattern breaks, intentionally, it seems. Snake's tongue, she says, so the basket can speak to the other side. You're not entirely sure what the other side means, but her voice leaves no room for doubt. She picks up another strip and continues weaving without further explanation. You begin to realize how deeply these patterns are more than decoration. Their language, their memory rendered in loops and knots. She begins to show you some of the traditional Cherokee motifs, the peace eye, a diamond shape often interpreted as symbolizing the four directions. The storm path, a jagged zigzag pattern said to represent resilience. The river swirl, a flowing spiral that mimics water currents and family lines. These shapes don't just reflect identity, they anchor it. Some motifs are clan-specific, passed down like names or songs. One woman points to a chevron she's been repeating in her coil and says softly, "My grandmother's mark. She wove it into everything, so I do too." Historians still argue whether the Cherokee used baskets to communicate across clans or settlements, using visual cues as a form of encoded messaging. Some archaeologists have claimed certain repeated motifs are early maps, showing river paths or mountain routes. Others believe the patterns served more spiritual purposes, guiding blessings or protection into the home. No one has agreed definitively, but the weavers here don't seem to need consensus. Their hands already know. The elder overseeing you gestures toward your own basket, which now sits on the ground with a gentle outward flare. She plucks 3 dark strips from your pile, arranges them in a triangle, and says, "Now you choose. You understand. This is your pattern, your story." You begin laying the strips one by one, working in the new motif. It's small, simple, really, but distinct. A signpost that this basket passed through your hands, however briefly. Beside you, a boy no older than 10 works intently on his first patterned piece. His tongue pokes out from one corner of his mouth in concentration. His grandmother nods as he fumbles through a twist, then gently adjusts it. "Not wrong," she says. "Just tangled," he grins. Another woman holds up her basket to the sun, turning it slowly. The light filters through the open coil, casting shadows in the dirt like ripples on a pond. You watch her silhouette as she sets it down gently, almost reverently, like someone placing a finished manuscript on a shelf. Suddenly, someone brings out a roll of painted bark, unrolls it slowly, and reveals sketches of ancient baskets preserved in ink and charcoal. They are schematic in style, straight lines, sharp angles, notes written in Cherokee syllabary. You learn that these aren't new. Some are copies of 19th century weavings made during times of upheaval, drawn by memory after removal. Others are from the 1930s, when elders were asked by anthropologists to recall patterns nearly lost. One particularly unusual sketch shows a basket shaped like a turtle shell, marked with alternating rows of dyed and undyed oak. The design was ceremonial, used in the green corn dance, a harvest festival with deep spiritual ties. Few make that shape today, but seeing it stirs a murmur among the weavers. An older woman mentions how her cousin attempted it once, but gave up after the 12th row. "Too stubborn," she jokes. "The basket? Not my cousin." You think again about your own weaving. It's not flawless. A few rows bulge slightly. One side curves more than the other. But the pattern, your pattern, holds. It rests quietly on the coil, not shouting, not whispering, just being. You run your fingers over it, feeling where the strips press together. It's a tactile sentence, a sentence only your hands know how to read. As the light begins to turn golden again, one of the weavers offers you a bit of cornbread from a wrapped bundle. You accept gratefully. It's warm, slightly sweet, and flecked with cracked maize. The flavor is grounding, familiar. You take another bite and look around the circle. Each basket here is different. Each pattern tells a different story, some loud, some subtle, all purposeful. You realize that even if these baskets were never used, never held corn, never hung on a wall, they would still matter, because they're more than objects. They're survival rendered in form, memory given shape, and yours, lopsided though it may be, has found its place among them. The scent of wood smoke and simmering broth drifts over the village as the weavers begin to wind down for lunch. You stand, stretching your legs, surprised at how deeply your body has folded into the rhythm of the morning. Your knees pop, your fingertips are stiff, but it's the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from doing something slowly, deliberately, and well. You're invited to join the meal by the central fire circle, where the warmth is steady and the voices are soft. Clay bowls are passed around, filled with a rich deer stew, thick with corn, beans, and wild onions. The stew smells earthy and sweet. You're handed a flatbread as well, warm and crisp from a nearby griddle, the steam rising like a ribbon when you tear it open. As you eat, conversation turns from basket coils to stories, some historical, some mythological, and some that toe the line between both. A younger man across the fire circle points to the bark wall behind him, where faint red lines form the outline of an ancient pictograph. They say that one's from the red paint people, he says, licking broth from his fingers, long before us, before even the Mississippians. Someone laughs softly, or maybe it's just a red handprint from someone making stew in the rain. The red paint people are something of a mystery, ancient inhabitants of the southeastern woodlands, known only from burial sites and artifacts stained with iron-rich ochre. Some Cherokee oral histories trace ancestral lines back to them, suggesting a lineage of weaving, dyeing, and crafting that stretches further than carbon dating can confirm. Historians still argue whether the connection is myth, fact, or both, but the elders here treat it with quiet reverence, as though even uncertainty is worthy of respect. Someone nearby begins a story about a basket so finely woven that it could trap sunlight. It was said to belong to a medicine woman who wove it during a thunderstorm while singing the names of her ancestors. When the basket was finished, the sun came back. You raise an eyebrow, amused, but the speaker only shrugs, saying she was good with her hands. The line between sacred and practical blurs easily here. You begin to realize that baskets weren't just containers. They were witnesses. They held food, yes, herbs, feathers, tools, but they also held moments, a daughter's first moon, a grandson's naming day, dried tears, ashes, laughter so hard it cracked a row. You take another bite of stew and glance around at the faces near you, sunlit skin, laughter lines, smudges of dye on fingers. The baskets are resting nearby, each catching the light in its own way. One elder places a folded deerskin into hers. Another adds pine needles. Another, a small shell. These aren't decorations. They're offerings, whispers of intent. One woman begins talking about her mother's baskets, stored in the rafters of her childhood home. She would only take them down when people were sick, she says. She believed the basket's curve could carry away fever, whether symbolic or not. You feel the weight of that belief, a quiet trust in the way fiber cradles, supports, lifts. Another woman, younger and more practical, says she once used a basket to trap a squirrel that snuck into her pantry. Wove a lid for it, too. She grins. He was mad, but polite. You all laugh, the sound soft and round, like a coil tightening into place. Once the stew bowls are cleared and the fire stoked, a few people begin unwrapping bundles of plants, not to dye this time, but to dry and store. You recognize sage and mint, others you don't know. A few are wrapped in corn husks and placed into small, lidded baskets lined with dry moss. The baskets, even now, continue their role, part functional, part ceremonial. Nearby, someone lifts a lid and shows you a bundle of river stones inside. For heating, she explains. We use them in sweat ceremonies. This basket's from my aunt's aunt. The weave is tight, almost watertight. The dyes are faded, but you can still make out the water path motif. The pattern hasn't gone anywhere. It's just grown quiet. You think about the baskets you've seen in museums, sealed behind glass, separated by neat labels and climate controls. Here, though, baskets breathe. They're meant to be held, opened, filled, emptied. Even the oldest ones are treated like elders, respected, consulted, never ignored. The conversation drifts toward trade, and someone begins explaining how, long ago, baskets traveled hundreds of miles across trails that curved through mountain passes, across rivers, and into other tribal lands. These were more than trade goods. They were introductions, ambassadors. Baskets brought salt to the coast, beads from the Gulf, copper from the north. They moved culture as much as they moved goods. Some weavers today still attempt those ancient paths, not for trade now, but for connection. I walked 30 miles last summer with just my basket and a compass, a man says, picked up pine resin, dropped off sassafras, talked to 2 Choctaw weavers, and one woman who swears she's part Shawnee but never checked the paperwork. You smile at that, part amused, part moved. These aren't just craft traditions, they're a living cartography, a way of mapping relationships through thread and time. The fire pops. Someone pours a new round of tea, mild, herby, tinged with sweet fern. You take a sip and lean back, letting your gaze rest on your own work again. A crooked bowl with a bold stripe. Now cradling a handful of dyed leaves you didn't mean to collect, but somehow did. It looks right. It looks like it belongs. You walk a narrow path that veers away from the village, guided by an elder and 2 younger women carrying empty baskets slung over their shoulders. The trail leads through low brush and wild raspberry tangles. Down toward the river's curve, sunlight flickers between the leaves like warm static, and the air carries a damp hush, as if the forest is holding its breath. You're heading toward a place the weavers call the Old Crossing, where a shallow ford once allowed traders, messengers, and kinfolk to cross safely with their goods. Before roads, before rails, before strangers built their fences, baskets traveled here, carried by foot, by canoe, by pony. The path you tread today once echoed with moccasin steps and the creak of strapped burden baskets. At the riverbank, the elder points to a broad, flat stone half buried in mud. Its surface is smoothed and grooved, worn from centuries of wading feet and guiding palms. She taps it with her cane. That's where they waited, she says, for tide, for trade, for news. You sit beside the stone and imagine the scene baskets laid out on hides, filled with herbs, beads, dried game, woven cloth, clay pipes, and fish hooks. On the far bank, a Choctaw trader waits, his own wares bundled in reed matting. Beside him, a girl clutches a smaller basket, an offering, maybe, or just something to carry her own hope. Trade among southeastern tribes was not just barter. It was ceremony. Baskets passed hand to hand were more than containers. They were trust made visible. Historians often reduce these exchanges to the value of salt or flint, but the baskets themselves were sometimes the prized object, especially when dyed in rare colors or shaped with unique tribal designs. You're shown how Cherokee baskets were distinguished even then tighter coils, certain patterns, more generous curves at the base. These features weren't just aesthetics, they reflected the needs of the homeland. A looser weave, for example, was ideal for storing chestnuts so they could breathe without molding. A wide-mouthed shape made it easier to rinse river mussels. Every curve was a decision. A woman kneels to draw a simple sketch in the mud with a stick, a circle with radiating lines. This is the old symbol for travel basket, she says, used on maps, carvings. Not many remember it now. She pats the drawing once, then lets the breeze smudge it back into the earth. As you sit with them, you're handed a worn oblong basket and told to examine its base. The cane is dyed with a muted purple and brown, soft hues that don't shout, just settle. The rows are irregular, with tiny stitches worked into the gaps. This one crossed 5 rivers, the elder says. We don't know who made it, but it came back. That statement lingers in your mind. It came back. A basket as traveler, as returning ancestor, as proof that not everything is lost to wind or fire or forgetting. You hear a story then, half whispered, half mocking, about a basket that was so prized it was stolen in a night raid, then returned weeks later with a sprig of sweetgrass and an apology woven into the rim, a peace offering in warp and weft. Some scholars speculate that basketry played a role in diplomacy between southeastern tribes. Patterns might have carried messages welcome, warning, mourning. Historians still argue whether these motifs were mutually understood or tribe-specific, but even without consensus, the baskets spoke. You watch the women begin to collect river stones, dried twigs, and bits of moss. They tuck these gently into their baskets, not as materials, but as reminders. One adds a small fish bone, another, a curled feather. You're invited to do the same. You choose a thin, smooth pebble and a broken reed. They feel like the right kind of fragments. As you walk back, someone mentions the trail of tears, not with anger, but with the kind of solemnity that needs no drama. During the forced removal in the 1830s, baskets were carried the whole way. Some made new along the journey, others preserved from home. They were used to store food, medicine, and hope. In some oral accounts, it's said that mothers would weave secret messages into the coils, just in case the family was separated. It's a quiet fact, too large to touch directly, but you feel it brush past you like a wind from somewhere very far back. The elder stops before the path enters the village again. She turns and says, "Trade paths go both ways. Not all roads are lost." Then she walks ahead, cane tapping gently against the packed dirt. You follow, your basket swinging at your hip. Heavier now, not with burden, but with meaning. Each step feels part of something longer than this day, something older than any fence or paper treaty, something still moving, still carried. The afternoon has worn thin, and the sun hangs lower now, throwing amber light across the rooftops and warming the clay walls with a kind of sleepy hush. You're back in the heart of the village, walking toward a structure you haven't yet entered, smaller than the rest. Shaded beneath a bent sycamore tree, the doorway is framed with split cane woven into a loose arch. There's no sign, just a subtle invitation in the way the door has been left slightly ajar. Inside, it's cooler, quieter. Baskets line every surface, on shelves, hooks, benches. But something here is different. These aren't for drying herbs or carrying berries. They are ceremonial. Their walls are higher, their coils tighter, their patterns more intense. Some are sealed with lids made from bark or hide. Others are open, revealing interiors lined with feathers or strips of red cloth. You're not alone. An older man stands near the back wall, bent over a low table as he wraps a bundle in river cane. His hands are steady, his eyes soft. You haven't seen many men weaving today, and something about his stillness makes you move slower, quieter. He glances up and nods. "Come in," he says simply. They won't mind. You realize they doesn't mean people. It means the baskets. He motions to a bench beside him. You sit. He's working on a small, squared basket with deep green dye and narrow bands of black for the green corn ceremony. He explains. It'll hold tobacco, only once, then it rests. His voice is soft, like someone humming from the inside out. Green corn is one of the most sacred Cherokee observances, marking renewal, forgiveness, and the first harvest of the season. You've read that the ceremony includes fasting, dancing, ritual purification, and communal reconciliation. But what you hadn't known is how central baskets are to the ritual. Some are used to carry sacred items, others to hold offerings or ashes. A few are burned at the end, their service complete. The man lifts another basket, a smaller one, square-lidded, with a carved turtle resting on top. For the healer, he says, bones, stones, dried roots. You don't open it unless you've earned the right. There's something in his tone, gentle but firm, that tells you this isn't just folklore. These baskets are alive in a different way. They aren't just tools or heirlooms. They're vessels of spirit. He tells you how, during times of illness. A healer might shake a basket gently to listen for how the contents settle, reading the sound like a whisper from the ancestors. Some baskets, he says, are buried with the dead. Others are hung in trees, so their spirits can return without being trapped. Historians still argue whether Cherokee ceremonial baskets evolved from everyday utility or were always considered sacred objects. Some suggest their use in medicine and ritual came later, influenced by other traditions, but others argue the spiritual link was there from the beginning, woven in the very first coil, hidden between the strands like breath in a flute. You're handed a ceremonial lid to hold. It's light but rigid, made of river cane dyed deep red and wrapped with thin deer sinew. The rim is coiled so tight it looks like the inside of a conch shell. In the center, a single turkey feather has been inserted, its quill tied down with a thread of goldenrod dyed bark. It's not just about what goes in, the man says. It's about what stays out. You nod, unsure if you completely understand, but understanding isn't the point. Presence is. He begins to tell you about his teacher, an elder who taught him not only the patterns and materials, but the silences. You don't talk when you make these, he says. You hum, you listen, you watch your breath. His hands keep moving as he speaks, wrapping a final strip of cane around the basket's rim. He doesn't check his work with his eyes, but with his fingertips, like reading Braille. He smiles then, not at you, but at the basket itself. That'll hold, he says, setting it gently beside the others. There's one basket in the room that no one touches. It sits on a raised stone platform, covered in a hide cloth. You ask quietly about it. He replies with a shrug. It was never opened. We don't know who made it, but we know not to move it. You understand? Not everything asks to be understood. Some things only ask to be left in peace. As you step outside again, the sun has dipped lower. The long shadows of the baskets flicker against the walls. The ceremonial ones will stay indoors. Others will travel. A few will be passed down. And some, like the one that's never been opened, will simply continue holding silence. Your own basket waits for you by the door. You pick it up. It feels different now, like it's watching, like it's listening. The air outside the ceremonial hut feels changed, heavier, more thoughtful. You walk slowly, your basket tucked under one arm, fingertips brushing its rim now and then, like checking a pulse. The shadows are longer now. Everything seems to speak more quietly the breeze, the voices, the small animals darting across the path. It's not silence, it's a different kind of conversation. In the distance, laughter echoes from a nearby house, children's laughter, sharp and high, and not far behind it, an unmistakable low chuckle. You follow the sound and soon find yourself at the edge of another weaving circle, but this one is different. At the center of it, comfortably cross-legged in a faded shirt and sun-creased jeans, sits a man weaving. He's quick, his hands familiar with the rhythm of cane and oak, and his expression somewhere between focus and amusement. Around him, a few boys are working with shorter strips, testing coils, tying knots. One has dyed his own fingers dark with walnut juice and proudly shows them off like battle scars. You sit nearby and watch. This is not what you expected. You've spent the whole day surrounded by women. Every basket, every dye, every coil led by female hands. And yet here is this man, surrounded by children, weaving with the same quiet reverence. He glances up. Didn't think men wove baskets, he asks without accusation. You admit it crossed your mind. He smiles. They didn't, not always. Then again, some did. And then we forgot. You learn that, once upon a time, Cherokee men did weave baskets, not as commonly, and often for different purposes. Stronger builds for storage, fishing traps, traveling packs. But colonization and the slow grinding machinery of erasure shifted cultural memory. Over time, basket weaving became women's work in the eyes of both outsiders and, eventually, the people themselves. And then I picked up a strip of cane one day and couldn't stop. He says with a shrug, felt like something was waking up in my hands. So I asked my aunt to teach me. He continues weaving, his voice calm, his hands unbothered by the speed at which the cane flexes, wraps, clicks into place. He tells you that today. There's a small but steady movement of Cherokee men reclaiming basketry. Some are artists and some educators, some just curious, some face resistance, others none at all. Historians still argue whether male weaving in indigenous southeastern tribes was widespread or rare. Records are sparse, and much of the oral history focuses on women, but a few surviving baskets with notched patterns once reserved for warrior lineages suggest that men left fingerprints in the tradition too. The man gestures to a basket he's working on. It's square, with thick reinforced corners and double-coiled sides. For traveling, he says, for someone who walks far and carries a lot. One of the boys asks if he'll make a lid. Nope, he says. Can't trap stories inside. Gotta let 'em breathe. There's a moment of quiet as the group works. Even the children fall into rhythm, bending, folding, threading. A boy drops his strip and curses under his breath. The man raises an eyebrow. Make the basket mad and it'll bite you, he says. The boy huffs and picks it back up. No one scolds. The lesson is absorbed through laughter and continued practice. Nearby, a woman joins the circle and hands the man a bundle of dyed strips. These are from your cousin, she says. She said don't mess them up. She would, he replies, holding them up to the light, deep blue, like twilight on river water. As he begins to incorporate the new strips into the travel basket, he asks you what kind of basket you're making. You hesitate. You say you're not sure. He nods. That's fine. The basket knows. You'll catch up. You glance at your own creation, still small, still uneven in places, but you see something in it now that wasn't there before. Movement, memory, a curve that echoes footsteps on a trail once lost, now found again. The children begin to trickle away, called in for evening chores. The man continues weaving, slower now, the firelight glinting off the wet shine of dyed cane. You watch for a while longer before standing. He looks up and says, "It's not who wove first that matters. It's who's still weaving." You thank him. He nods, already threading the next coil, already deep in the spiral of craft and time. As you walk back toward your own seat, the sky begins to shift. The first stars blink through the evening veil. Your basket feels warmer in your hands, heavier again, but not with burden, with lineage, with possibility. Back in the heart of the village, the sun has nearly vanished, leaving a violet haze just above the treetops. A few lanterns have been lit, hollowed gourds strung with cane, their flickering light casting soft shadows across the packed earth paths. The weaving circle is quieter now, and the baskets completed earlier sit in neat rows along the porch edges, as if cooling like loaves of bread after a long bake. You're led to a different part of the village this time, toward a modest structure with a woven door curtain and polished stone steps. Inside is cooler, quieter. This is the room where the old tools are kept. The woman who greets you here is barefoot, silver-haired, and quick-eyed. She offers no greeting beyond a nod, just gestures toward a long bench where various weaving tools rest bone awls. Cane splitters, smooth stones, antler scrapers, river shells polished from years of use. Everything here has been handled so many times, it seems to vibrate gently in the presence of your unfamiliar fingers. She picks up a blade with a handle darkened from generations of touch. "5 hands before mine," she says. "That's what my uncle told me. His grandmother's grandmother carved the first edge. You run your fingers along its worn grip and imagine the rhythm of those unseen weavers, hands that shaped baskets for storing corn, for healing herbs, for burial rites, for ceremonies and feasts. Tools, here, aren't just implements. They're stories with sharp edges and soft handles, one by one. She lays out items with no spoken explanations. A bark-wrapped coil, a comb made from turkey bone, a reed stencil in the shape of a crescent. You're told these aren't museum pieces. They're still used, still needed. Some of the tools are incredibly humble. A stone with one edge chipped into a sharp crescent, a piece of shell tied to a stick with sinew, a pine knot used to press down rows during coiling. No embellishments, no fancy craftsmanship, just the accumulated memory of generations working slowly, steadily, with purpose. Every hand changes the tool, the woman says, and the tool changes the hand. You sit and listen as she tells a story about a man who carved a weaving knife from a deer antler in the winter of a great sickness. He used it to make a basket for carrying medicinal roots. After he passed, the knife stayed in his lodge, yet decades later, a young woman found it and used it to carve her own strips during a drought. Now it sits here, blade still sharp, handle wrapped in worn hide. Historians still debate how far back the tradition of tool inheritance stretches among the Cherokee. Some claim tools were strictly functional, made when needed, discarded when worn. Others argue that certain families passed down favored implements like sacred heirlooms, imbuing them with symbolic value. In this room, there's no debate. The tools are relatives. You're handed a small reed stencil, a fragile-looking item used to guide beginner hands when laying out complex basket patterns. It's stained in places, bent at the corners, but intact. Use it if you want, she says. Just don't thank it out loud. You pause. Why not? She smiles faintly, makes it shy. There's a kind of reverence in the way tools are treated here, not as precious things to display, but as quiet elders that still have work to do. One small knife is stored in a wooden box lined with shredded bark and dry moss. Another is wrapped in old cloth marked with faint spirals, patterns echoing those seen in ancient petroglyphs up in the mountains. You're shown a ceremonial scraper, used only once a year, during the first weave of the season. No one speaks while it's used. It's said to know its own purpose, and if disturbed, it refuses to work properly, whether or not you believe that. The blade gleams in the lantern light like it remembers every spring. You try a few tools under the woman's watchful gaze. She corrects you only once, gently adjusting your grip on a pressure awl. Push like you're brushing hair, she says. And suddenly the strip bends perfectly into place. It's such a small correction, but it changes everything. You realize how different your basket would feel if built entirely with these. You run a finger across your own scraper, a modern metal blade borrowed earlier in the day, and feel how it lacks the memory that hangs in this room. She places a final tool in your lap, a wedge-shaped bone, carved with a spiral on one end. Made by my cousin, she says. He taught me to weave when I was small, said the basket doesn't start until the tool listens. You wonder if that's why your early attempts felt so uncertain, like your hands were trying to convince the cane it was meant to obey. But maybe, just maybe, it's not about control. Maybe it's about agreement, conversation, trust. You place the bone tool back into its cloth wrap and bow your head slightly. The woman nods once, satisfied. Tomorrow you can borrow it, if it agrees. As you step back into the night air, the sky has deepened to navy. Crickets sing in lazy, syncopated rhythm. Your hands feel heavier now, not tired, but fuller. You're no longer just holding cane and color and coil. You're holding a dialogue. The night deepens, and you walk slowly back to the fire circle where the last embers glow orange beneath a thick blanket of stars. A few weavers remain, silhouettes against the flickering light, speaking in low voices, their baskets now resting beside them like sleeping pets. Someone hands you a wool shawl, woven not from cane, but dyed in the same warm tones: walnut, pokeweed, goldenrod. You drape it over your shoulders and sink into a seat near the fire's edge. Across from you, two elders sit quietly. One begins to speak, not loudly, not for effect, but like someone turning over a stone they've been carrying in their palm for years. She tells you of a time when weaving was not done in the open, when basket making, like speaking Cherokee itself, was pushed underground, hidden from view, whispered between generations, kept alive in fragments during the 1830s. The Cherokee were forcibly removed from their homelands in the southeast along the brutal trail now known as the Trail of Tears. Thousands died. Thousands more were scattered, fragmented, and set adrift in unfamiliar territory. And yet, some carried baskets the entire journey. Others wove along the way, finding cane where they could, stripping roots for dye, salvaging tools from memory, and even after arrival in the unfamiliar West. The basket traditions persisted, quietly, unofficially, but persist they did. You ask gently, were there places to find river cane out there? The elder beside her chuckles once, low and dry. Not at first. They said, this isn't your home. like the land didn't understand us. But the cane came anyway. We planted, we waited, and it grew. Historians still argue how much of the basket weaving tradition survived intact after removal. Some suggest it dwindled into symbolic practice, more about identity than utility. Others insist it never disappeared, just shifted shape, adapting to new tools, new lands, new circumstances. Both are true, and neither tells the whole story. You learn of families who passed down weaving knowledge coded into lullabies, of elders who hid basket patterns in quilts to preserve the motifs when they couldn't access the materials, of one woman who used sewing thread instead of cane, just to keep her fingers moving the right way. She was blind by then, someone says, but her hands still remembered the coils. The boarding school era brought a new kind of forgetting. Children were taken from their homes, forced into institutions designed to strip them of language, ritual, dress, and craft. And yet somehow basket weaving endured even there. One woman shares how her mother was sent to a school in the 1940s and forbidden to speak Cherokee. But at night, beneath the covers, she would unravel the threads from old laundry sacks and try to weave mini baskets using her shoelaces. Her roommate thought she was just fidgeting, the woman says, but she was rebuilding. Another tells of her aunt, who used broom straw to teach her daughters the weave pattern by candlelight, despite warnings from dormitory staff. She said, "If your fingers forget, your children forget." You're shown a photograph, worn at the edges, of a group of girls in uniform, each holding a small, round basket in their laps. The patterns are barely visible, but the expressions are clear. Not pride, not defiance, just steadiness. Like they knew what they were doing mattered. A younger woman joins the circle now, wearing a t-shirt printed with a spiral design you now recognize as the water path. She's a teacher at a community center where she's helping reclaim lost weaving methods. We dig through archives, but we also listen, she says. Sometimes the baskets and old photos tell us more than the notes beside them. She opens a woven satchel and pulls out a set of laminated prints, black and white photos from the early 20th century, showing Cherokee women weaving in Oklahoma. The baskets are different from what you saw this morning. Squatter, sometimes angular. Materials vary, but the patterns endure. You see that same triangle, that same looping band, that same steady hand. Each adaptation tells a story of survival. Not resistance through loud refusal, but persistence through quiet return. Someone beside you murmurs, "The baskets weren't loud, so we weren't either." You're handed a coil of dark-stained cane and asked to add it to your own piece, not to fix anything, but to mark this moment, to let the past walk beside your present. You work the coil in slowly, deliberately. As you tighten it, you feel a shift, not in the material, but in you. This isn't a recreation, it's a continuation, the next spiral of something too strong to unravel completely. Above you, the stars burn steady, the fire crackles low. Someone begins humming, not a song exactly, but a shape made of sound. The shawl is warm on your shoulders. Your fingers, though tired, keep moving. Just one more coil, just one more row. Morning arrives without ceremony. No loud rooster, no alarm. Just a soft brightening behind your eyelids and the muted shuffle of footsteps on dew-damp ground. The woven mat beneath you has molded comfortably to your body, and for a moment, you debate whether it's even worth moving at all. But the thought of the weaving circle, waiting, sunlit, half filled with drying baskets and morning chatter, draws you up into the day. You step outside into mist that clings low to the ground like breath. The sky above a pale watercolor of peach and silver. The air smells of damp earth, river stone, and something faintly smoky. You clutch your unfinished basket and head toward the fire circle once again, where a few weavers already sit, brushing hair from their faces and stretching sore wrists. Today, you're joining a community class. It's informal, no blackboards, no name tags, no long-winded lectures, just a shaded bench, a coil of cane, and a teacher who greets you with a quiet, "You made it back." She's younger than most you've seen, maybe in her 30s, her apron covered in fingerprints of blue and rust. Around her, a small group of children and teenagers sit cross-legged, baskets in various stages of growth in their laps. She begins by holding up a lopsided basket. "First one I ever made," she says. Not with shame, but affection. Leaked pine nuts like a sieve. Everyone laughs. Even the elders nearby chuckle from their porches. Then she lifts her current piece, a wide basket with a flared mouth and a dense checkerboard pattern in gold and indigo. "Same hands," she says, "different rhythm." She turns her attention to the group. One boy's working on a wall that won't sit straight. Another girl is struggling with her coil tension. You can see her frustration building, her lips tight. But the teacher kneels beside her and whispers something. The girl exhales, undoes a few rows, and starts again. You can't hear the exact words, but the gesture says enough it's okay to begin again. This is the rhythm of revival, a return not to the past exactly, but through it. Around you are the living threads of traditions that were nearly severed, tied back together by the patience of hands too stubborn to forget. You glance at the baskets nearby. Some are classic forms, broad, low, and tightly coiled. Others are new experiments, square bases, sculpted rims, patterns that stretch the language of motifs just enough to feel fresh. One student even weaves tiny shells into her basket walls, not for utility, but for the gentle clink they make when shaken. "Sounds like creek water," she explains with a shrug. You begin to weave again. Each movement feels more confident now, not polished, not perfect, but grounded. The base of your basket holds, the walls rise slowly. You add another row, and then another. Your hands remember without needing instruction. Around you, the weavers share quiet conversation. One elder explains to a student that some patterns were traditionally reserved for marriage baskets. Another points out that a certain zigzag once symbolized wind moving through tall grass. Or maybe snakes, she adds. Hard to say. Wind and snakes both travel quiet. Historians still argue whether these symbolic meanings were fixed or flexible. Some suggest basket motifs followed strict rules, passed down like scripture. Others argue they were interpretive, shifting with time, maker, or context. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in the coil, in the space between repetition and variation. A boy beside you asks what your pattern means. You look down and realize you're not sure. The colors flow well. The shape is solid, but meaning that hasn't arrived yet. You tell him, "Maybe it means something I don't know yet." He shrugs. "That's what mine means too." Fair enough. As the class continues, the teacher shares more than just technique. She tells the students where to find healthy cane, how to ask permission before harvesting, what songs to hum while dyeing bark. She explains that some people are trying to grow cane again on old family land. Others have started seed saving networks for dye plants. The revival isn't just craft, it's ecosystem. It's reweaving more than baskets, it's reweaving the land itself at one point. She holds up a strip and says, "This one's not good." Then she runs her fingers along its rough edge. But it's trying. She weaves it in anyway. That, you realize, is the spirit here. Not perfection, not replication, but honesty. A willingness to listen, to repeat, to repair. One elder watching from a distance nods. "They're doing it right," she says. "Not fast, not loud, just right." As the session winds down, the students begin to pack up their tools. Some baskets are nearly done, others just beginning. A few will be undone tonight and reworked tomorrow, but none will be discarded. Even the mistakes will be saved, for teaching, for remembering, for proof that the thread held. Even if the row wandered, you look at your own basket again. It's not a showpiece. It's not symmetrical, but it holds. The sky has shifted again, no longer morning, not yet evening. That quiet, golden hour when shadows stretch long and the light feels warm enough to press between your fingers. You sit alone now, a little ways from the village, your back resting against a leaning cedar tree, your finished basket in your lap. It's not flawless. The rim is a bit uneven. One section dips where your coil got too tight, but your fingers rest on it the way one might hold a worn photograph, gently, with fondness. It is yours. It exists, and somehow it says more than you could have planned. As you trace the dyed strips, some black from walnut, some copper from soaked oak, you remember the stories folded into each row, not just your own effort, but the echoes of the hands that guided yours, the patterns they lent, the tools they shared, the silences they respected. You hear a soft footfall behind you and turn to see the elder from the morning class. She lowers herself beside you without a word, her own basket in hand, so it's long and narrow, lidded with a tight zigzag of deep indigo and red, the storm path. You recognize a pattern that speaks of change, resistance, and survival. She doesn't ask to see yours. She just sits for a while. The two of you say nothing, the wind rustling through the cedar branches, the sound of the river rolling softly in the distance. Eventually, she speaks. "My mother used to say a finished basket isn't the end. It's just the part where it stops needing your hands." You nod. You understand. She goes on to explain that in some families, baskets are left outside overnight when first finished, not as a test, but as a gift to the wind, to the night creatures, to whatever spirit wants to see what's been made. Sometimes they come back just the same, she says, sometimes with a leaf inside, or a feather, or nothing at all. That's their way of saying thanks, or not yet, or keep going. She places her basket beside yours and leans back. "I left my first basket out under a mulberry tree. Came back to find a little frog inside. Never wove another one without a frog mark in it since." You look at your own piece and think maybe you'll leave it out too. The conversation turns, meandering like the river itself. She tells you how basketry has become part of language revival efforts, how certain terms for tools, shapes, and patterns only exist in Cherokee, and how, by teaching young people to weave, they learn more than craft. They learn how to name, how to speak again. Historians still argue whether the symbolic language of baskets counts as a true literacy. Some claim it lacks grammar or structure. Others defend its narrative integrity. But here, beside this cedar tree, The idea of needing validation from scholarship feels beside the point. This one here, she says, tapping the side of her basket, has everything I need to remember the winter my husband passed. He died in his sleep. He's peaceful. This pattern holds it all: the cold, the silence, the meals I cooked for one, and the sun that came back, even though I didn't ask it to. She doesn't look sad when she says it. She looks steady. The wind shifts slightly, carrying with it the scent of pine smoke and damp earth. Somewhere a bird cries out, sharp and brief. Then gone. The elder stands and dusts off her hands. Bring yours to the fire tonight, she says. We'll let it rest. You remain a moment longer, watching her figure grow smaller as she walks back to the village. Then you look again at your basket. It doesn't tell everything, but it tells enough. And you're not done. Not really. There's a whole coil you could add next time. Maybe a tighter rim, a different pattern, a better balance of color. But this one is complete and ready to listen. Night returns like a low tide, soft, inevitable, and heavy with stillness. You carry your finished basket in both hands now, cradling it as one might a sleeping bird. The village glows faintly in the distance, flickering with lamplight and the last quiet chores of the day. Smoke from the central fire drifts lazily upward, losing shape among the stars. You follow the path toward the fire circle, the same one you first walked this morning, though it feels like years ago. Everything looks changed, not in form, but in presence. The baskets, the benches, the worn smooth stones. They're not just part of the scenery anymore. You see how they hold memory like the baskets themselves. The others have gathered again, some with their own finished pieces, some with tools laid across their laps, still mid-weave, still deep in the coil. But this moment isn't about work. It's about pause. You take your place in the circle and set your basket beside you, just outside the firelight. One by one, others do the same, not showy, not ceremonial in any grand, dramatic sense, but full of intention. Someone adds dry cedar to the fire. The flames leap higher for a moment, casting golden light across the baskets, which now ring the fire like quiet sentinels. The elder who guided you earlier speaks, not loudly, not formally, just enough for everyone to hear. She talks about rest, about how every basket deserves a night to breathe before it's asked to carry anything, about how breath is what shapes the space inside, and without breath, even the finest weave collapses. You let that settle. One of the younger weavers begins humming again, a tune you heard earlier, half lullaby, half prayer. The others join softly, until the fire crackles beneath the sound like a second voice. You close your eyes and feel the vibration of the circle, the quiet pride, the long memory, the stitched together past. It's then that someone begins placing small items into a central bowl, not offerings exactly, but markers, a scrap of dyed bark, a river stone, a loop of thread, a broken reed, split and frayed. You're handed a strip of cane, short, dyed dark, soft from soaking. You run your fingers over it, then tie it into a simple knot and place it gently into the bowl, for effort, for presence, for being part of the thread. You sit back and watch the fire settle lower. The baskets rest where they are. No one hurries to gather them. No one inspects anyone else's work. They just are, completed, just waiting, breathing. You feel your own shoulders soften, your fingers, still dyed and a little sore, twitch once and then still. Your breath, too, begins to match the rhythm of the fire, long, low, even. Someone yawns, someone else leans against a post and closes their eyes. No one speaks. The hush becomes its own kind of gratitude. The sky above is endless, but your gaze rests on the small, curved rim of your basket, the place where your final coil sits snug against the row before it. It holds. It doesn't lean. It rests. And now, so do you. So now, you let the fire dim in your mind. Let the warmth of the circle fall away, replaced by the soft hush of nighttime air and the lingering scent of cane and ash. Picture your basket, complete, humble, perhaps a little crooked, but woven with every breath you gave it. It no longer needs your hands. It sits now in quiet knowing. The weavers return to their homes, their tools tucked away, their fingers finally still. One by one, lanterns go out. The village settles into sleep. Even the stars seem to slow, blinking slower, softer, above the dark treetops. Your own breath follows. In, out. A little slower now, a little deeper. Let your thoughts unwind like a loose coil. Let the stories, the patterns, the voices fade gently into the hush. Nothing here asks anything more of you. Not tonight. Your basket holds it all. The learning, the mistakes, the steady rhythm of trying again. It remembers, and it will wait. You've walked alongside generations tonight, heard their hands, their songs, their silences. You've listened to the cane. You've answered with your own shape. Now, let the fire in your mind glow low. Let it warm your bones as your breath lengthens. There's nothing left to hold now but stillness and sleep and the quiet arc of the final coil.